All right, in this video, I'm going to do a bit of a roll up on how I took my basement little gaming area that my kids were using from an area that's really just concrete floor and walls that are insulated and drywalled into something that looks more like this. Overall, the cost for this project was under $3,000. That includes getting TVs and a bunch of other things. But in this video, I'm going to break down the cost for each of the components of this video game room construction. I do have a separate video made, so if you want to watch any of the videos to see how I did anything specifically, I'll put links to each of the videos in the description of this video. This video will mainly focus on the overall project and the cost associated with doing about 100 to 150 square foot gaming room or room similar to this in your basement. And it must be noted that I do have most of the tools to do this job. So if you have no tools whatsoever, that's going to be a big cost for you, but then you'll have all the tools to do this. So if you have nothing, you should factor in at least $1,000 just for tools. Really, the first thing I did for this project is framing and drywalling, which I think is probably a good place to start. For the 2x4s, the 2x2s, etc., it costs about $175. All dollar figures are in Canadian, and this is pre-trade war pricing. Obviously, you can check the date on when this was made. We'll see how things go. But for the wood, 2x4s, 2x2s, like I said, it was about $125. And then for nails and screws, just an assortment of fasteners, it cost about 50 bucks. So not too expensive. Now, I don't have any drywalling videos, but I used about 10 sheets of drywall, and then I used mud and paint, and the total on that was about $375. $160 for the drywall, about $60 for mud and sanding stuff, and then I needed 2 different containers of paint, one for ceiling, one for walls, and then some of the painting stuff, so about $150 there. So total for framing and drywalling was about $550, like I said, Canadian. Just getting into drywall and everything painted has a pretty major impact on the overall look of the basement. The next thing I worked on after drywalling was a little bit of electrical. There's very little to do here, so this is variable for what you need to do. The only thing I really did was add a light switch, which has a dimmer, and for a gaming room, having that dimmable light switch is a big deal. Definitely being able to adjust the lighting levels has a big impact, and you know, the light switch was only about $30. I do end up changing out this light bulb from this string one into an LED one, and you do need some wire. Overall, I spent maybe $100, mainly because the lights were on clearance, so they were super cheap. Now, once the drywall and lighting was done, I went on and started working on the floors. This involved leveling and doing subflooring. So now, because it's a small area, there's not a whole lot of leveling to be done, but the bags of self-leveler cost about $40 each. They weren't that cheap, and I only needed 2 of them. And then obviously I needed a trowel, that kind of thing that I could use in the cement, and you know, if it gets ruined, it gets ruined. So I was at about $100 to get the floor leveled. And then really the more expensive element of this was the dry core flooring. I used about 30 of these 2 foot by 2 foot tiles and a bunch of Tapcon screws to screw some to the floor. The dry core panels are about $8 each, so I spent about $240 on those, making the subflooring portion of this about $340, which brings my total for the job so far up to about $990 Canadian, you know, give or take depending on tax. And obviously the cost on this is highly variable to the price of materials. Now, for the final stage of the flooring, actually getting the flooring down, the cost was about $530. About $40 for the felt underlay, about $40 for the foam that goes directly underneath the laminate flooring, and then the laminate flooring, again, this is a highly variable cost depending on what you get, but it cost me about $3.75 a square foot for the flooring. And you know, that worked out to about $450 for this room. So overall, to put the floor on top of the dry core, it cost about $530 Canadian, bringing my total to about $1,520. And this is sort of where the number of tools required starts creeping up on you as you go sort of beyond just the standard chop saw or a circular saw and into some more refined tools for doing trim work and stuff. So like I said, if you have no tools, the price is going to be pretty variable, and you need to take that into consideration. And that's what the floor looks like. And overall, although this room is pretty small, I think it does work out fairly well for a small kids gaming room. Now, this door was pretty expensive because it is a solid core door and it's a pre-hung. It's not just a slab door that I could drop in. It's a 32 by 80, and obviously that's in inches, although this is Canada, we still do doors in inches for whatever reason. And the doors and trim was about $550. It was about $350 for the door. The trim including the trim for the room, was about $100. The door handle cost about $50, and then for paint, caulk, and glue, it was about another $50. So $550 in total, and that brings me to about $2,070 Canadian. The door is an optional step, but for a room that is a gaming room with a TV, obviously being able to separate the furnace is a big deal. And although you didn't really see it in this video because I did it in a different video, there is rock wool sound deadening insulation in the wall all around the furnace room to keep the sound down as well. I do use a different paint on the door and trim, and it is the Sherwin-Williams specifically for door and trim. So it's got a little bit more shine to it than the paint on the wall, and it's a little bit easier to clean as well. Now, for the extras that aren't really included in the build, I did get a new desk for the computer. So it's a smaller desk, it doesn't take up as much space, and that cost about $150 off Amazon. It's nothing special, but it's big enough for the computer and the monitor, and it saves a lot of space in this very small room. The big chair, I already had that, so I'm not gonna really factor that into any cost. I got the fireplace TV stand combo on clearance for $300, and I did put it all together properly at first, but then I took off that back panel for where the video game consoles are going to go, and that's an Xbox One X and a PS3, and I took that off because the Xbox One X was overheating with that back panel on. And then I did get a new TV, which is just a 43-inch 4K TV, and it's super cheap. It's the cheapest one I could find. It's I think it's a TCL or TLC, maybe that's a band, I don't know. And it was only $260 Canadian, and I got that at Best Buy. It was, I think, $60 off, but it looks good for what it's being used for with a PS3 and an Xbox One X. And all of those additional expenses of the computer desk, the TV stand with the fireplace, and the TV came to $610. Overall, this resulted in a total cost of about $2,680 Canadian. So under $3,000. Obviously, your prices may vary based on where you are and what you want to do. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.